Jake Martinez was having a bad morning. The coffee maker in the Terra Command Space Station had broken again, and the replacement parts wouldn't arrive for another week. He sat at his desk, staring at the monitors that showed nothing but empty space and the occasional piece of space junk floating past. Earth's moon, the deep space communication array, had been quiet for months. Most alien species avoided Earth's sector of space. The few that had made contact with humanity had spread stories about the crazy humans, who came from a world that tried to kill them every single day. Jake didn't mind the reputation it kept. The troublemakers away, the signal started as a whisper of static. Jake almost ignored it, thinking it was just interference from a solar flare. But something about the rhythm made him pause. He turned up the volume and listened carefully. What he heard made his blood run cold. The voice was speaking in broken Galactic Common, the universal language used by most spacefaring species, but this wasn't a normal transmission. It was a cry for help, desperate and filled with terror. Please ... anyone. We are dying. The hegemony has come. Our world burns. Our people are taken. We have heard stories of the death world called Earth. We need the warriors from the world of fire and pain. Please help us. Jake's hands moved quickly over his console, recording the message and trying to trace its source. The signal was coming from deep space over 20 light-years away. It had taken decades to reach Earth, which meant the situation was already desperate when it was sent. The alien continued speaking, and Jake could hear explosions in the background. I am Elder Keth of the Kaleri people. We are not warriors. We know only peace, but the hegemony knows only war. They take our children, they burn our cities, they kill our elders. We have heard whispers of humans who can survive anything. We beg you to help us. The transmission cut to static. Jake sat in silence for a moment, then reached for the red phone that connected directly to Admiral Lisa Harper's office. Admiral, you need to hear this, Jake said when Harper answered. Martinez, it's 6 a.m. This better be important. Ma'am, we just received a distress call from an alien species called the Kaleri. They're under attack by something called the hegemony, and they're asking specifically for Earth's help. There was a long pause. Send me the recording. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Admiral Harper arrived at the communication center with her aide, Commander Pete Walsh. She was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. She listened to the recording 3 times without saying a word. Have we ever heard of these Kaleri before? She asked Walsh. No, ma'am. I ran a search through our databases. Nothing. Same with the hegemony. We're flying blind here. Harper nodded. What about the transmission source? Jake pulled up the data on his screen. Signal originated from the Kepler 442 system. About 27 light-years from Earth. The delay means this message is at least 20 years old. So we don't even know if they're still alive, Harper said quietly. Ma'am, there's something else, Jake said. The signal is repeating. It's been broadcasting the same message for hours. Either it's automated or they're still fighting, Harper finished. Walsh looked at the star charts. Admiral, even if we wanted to help, we don't have the ships. Our deepest space mission was to Proxima Centauri, and that was just a survey team. Harper studied the data. We have the prototype ships, the Vengeance-class destroyers. They're not tested for long-range missions, but they're our best shot. You're seriously considering this? Walsh asked. Commander, in the past 50 years, how many alien species have asked Earth for help? None, ma'am. And how many have specifically asked for our military? Walsh was quiet for a moment. Also none. Harper turned to Jake. What exactly did they say about Earth? Jake played the recording again. The alien's voice was shaking as it spoke. We have heard stories of the death world called Earth. We need the warriors from the world of fire and pain. Death world, Harper repeated. That's what they call Earth. Ma'am, most alien species avoid us because they think we're dangerous. Walsh said, maybe they're right. Harper looked at the star charts again. Get me Captain Ryan Brooks? Tell him to prepare the Vengeance for a long-range mission. And contact the other ship commanders. We're going to need a fleet. Admiral, with respect, we don't know anything about this situation. We don't know who the Kaleri are or what they've done. We don't know who this hegemony is or why they're attacking. This could be a trap. Harper turned to face Walsh. Commander, that alien out there is asking for help. They're dying, and they think we're their only hope. What would you have us do? Maybe we should send a diplomatic mission first. Try to understand the situation before we commit to military action. By the time a diplomatic mission reaches them, they'll be dead. Harper's voice was firm. Jake, how long would it take our fastest ships to reach the Kaleri system? Using the new hyperspace drives, about 2 weeks, ma'am. But that's pushing the engines to their limits. Then we don't have time to debate this. Harper picked up her phone. Get me the Secretary of Defense and call an emergency meeting of the Terran Defense Council. We're going to war. Over the next 6 hours, Terra Command became a hive of activity. Military leaders, scientists, and politicians arrived from around the world. The debate was fierce and loud. We can't just fly into an alien war zone, argued General Mike Stevens from the Army. We don't know what we're walking into. The Kaleri are clearly the victims here, countered Dr. Susan Clark, the head of xenobiology. They're asking for help against an aggressive empire. How do we know they're telling the truth? Asked Senator Bill Roberts. For all we know, they're the bad guys trying to trick us into helping them. Harper stood at the head of the conference table, listening to the arguments. Finally, she raised her hand for silence. I've made my decision, she said. We're going to help them. The room erupted in protests, but Harper continued. Earth has always stood up for those who can't defend themselves. We're not going to start backing down now. Admiral, this is madness, said General Stevens. We're talking about sending our ships into a war zone 27 light-years from home. If something goes wrong, we can't send help. Then we'd better make sure nothing goes wrong, Harper replied. Dr. Clark leaned forward. What do we know about the Kaleri? What kind of people are we helping? Harper nodded to Jake, who had been analyzing the transmission. From what we can tell, they're a peaceful species. They mentioned having no warriors, which suggests they don't have a military culture. They seem to focus on art, science, and philosophy. And the hegemony? Asked Walsh. Unknown, but based on the Kaleri's description, they appear to be a conquering empire that uses overwhelming force to subjugate other species. Senator Roberts shook his head. This is exactly the kind of situation Earth should avoid. We're still new to the galactic community. We shouldn't be picking sides in alien wars. We're not picking sides, Harper said. We're choosing to help people who are being slaughtered. The debate continued for hours, but Harper's mind was already made up. She had seen the fear in the alien's voice, heard the desperation in their plea for help. Somewhere out there, an entire species was facing extinction, and they had turned to Earth as their last hope. Finally, the vote was called. By a narrow margin, the Terran Defense Council approved the mission. As the politicians filed out of the room, Harper remained behind with her senior staff. The real work was just beginning. How many ships can we muster? She asked. 12, replied Captain Brooks, who had joined them during the debate. The Vengeance, the Aurora, the Relentless, and 9 support vessels. It's not much, but it's what we have. How many people? About 800 total. 300 Marines, 200 Navy personnel, and 300 support staff including medical, engineering, and scientific teams. Harper nodded. It'll have to be enough. How soon can we launch? Give us 72 hours and we'll be ready. Harper looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were dying, and they were counting on Earth to save them. She just hoped they weren't too late. Captain Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of the TDF Vengeance, watching the final preparations for humanity's first interstellar war. The ship hummed with activity as engineers ran last-minute checks on the hyperspace engines and weapon systems. Through the massive windows, he could see the other 11 ships of the hastily assembled fleet. The Vengeance was Earth's newest warship, built using technology that had been theoretical just 5 years ago. She was sleek and deadly, designed for speed and firepower rather than comfort. Her crew of 62 men and women were the best Earth had to offer, but none of them had ever fought in space before. "Captain, we're receiving final crew reports," said Lieutenant Amy Chun, the ship's communications officer. "All vessels report ready for departure." Brooks nodded. The fleet was small but impressive. The Aurora served as their assault carrier, loaded with fighters and marines. The Relentless was their heavy cruiser, armed with enough firepower to level a small city. The 9 support ships carried everything from medical supplies to the experimental weapons that Earth scientists had been developing in secret. "Any word from command about what we're walking into?" asked Commander Kate Sullivan, Brooks' second in command. "Nothing new. The Calleri system has been quiet for the past week. Either they've stopped broadcasting or—" Brooks didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what the silence might mean. Dr. Amy Peterson entered the bridge, carrying a tablet full of data. She was Earth's leading expert on alien biology, though her knowledge came mostly from studying the few species that had made contact with humanity. The Calleri would be her first chance to meet a truly alien civilization. "Captain, I finished analyzing the Calleri transmission," she said. "I've learned some interesting things about them." Brooks gestured for her to continue. "What did you find?" "They're definitely herbivores. Their language structure suggests a very cooperative society. They use plural pronouns even when talking about individual actions, which means they think of themselves as part of a group rather than as individuals." "That could be useful," said Sullivan. "If we can save some of them, they might be able to help us understand their culture." "There's more," Peterson continued. "Based on their voice patterns and the background sounds in the transmission, I think they're smaller than humans. Probably about half our size and weight," Brooks frowned. "That makes them even more vulnerable to whatever this hegemony is." The intercom crackled to life. "All hands, this is Admiral Harper. Prepare for departure in 10 minutes. Brooks turned to his crew. "You heard the Admiral? Take us out, Lieutenant Chun." The fleet moved away from Earth's orbit in perfect formation. Brooks watched his home planet shrink behind them, knowing that some of them might never see it again. The blue and green world that had shaped them through millions of years of evolution was about to send its children to war among the stars. Hyperspace. "Drives are ready, Captain," reported the ship's engineer, Tony Garcia. "All systems are green." "Take us to hyperspace," Brooks ordered. The stars outside the windows stretched into lines of light, then vanished completely as the fleet entered the strange realm between dimensions. They were committed now. The next time they saw normal space, they would be in an alien star system, facing an unknown enemy. Colonel Dan Miller sat in the Aurora's briefing room, addressing his Marine commanders. The room was packed with Earth's finest soldiers, men and women who had trained for every kind of combat except the one they were about to face. "Listen up, people," Miller said. "We're going into this blind. We don't know what the hegemony looks like, how they fight, or what kind of weapons they have. But we do know one thing. They're bullies who pick on peaceful species that can't fight back." Sergeant Linda Martinez raised her hand. "Sir, what do we know about the Calleri? Are they going to be able to help us?" "From what the science team tells? U.S., they're not warriors. They've probably never seen real combat. We're going to be their entire military force." Miller looked around the room. "That means we can't afford to make mistakes. Every one of us needs to be perfect." "What about the enemy numbers?" asked Lieutenant Carl Johnson. "Unknown. But intelligence suggests they have at least 100 ships and tens of thousands of ground troops. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting in their territory." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Sergeant Martinez spoke up. "Sir, with respect, we've been outnumbered before. Remember the Battle of Stalingrad, the defense of the Alamo? Humans have a habit of winning when we shouldn't," Miller smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. The hegemony has been conquering peaceful species for decades. They've never faced anyone who fights back? They've certainly never faced humans." On the bridge of the Relentless, Captain Scott Davis reviewed the tactical data. His ship was designed for one purpose: to destroy enemy vessels with overwhelming firepower. The Relentless carried more weapons than the rest of the fleet combined, but she was also slower and less maneuverable. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Vengeance," reported his communications officer. "Put it through." Brooks' voice filled the bridge. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. We'll be dropping out of hyperspace in 6 hours. I want all crews at battle stations 30 minutes before we arrive." Davis nodded to his crew. "You heard the man. Start prepping the weapon systems. I want every gun loaded and ready to fire the moment we see the enemy." His tactical officer, Lieutenant Beth Thompson, looked up from her console. "Sir, what if the Kaleri are already dead? What if we're too late?" "Then we make sure the hegemony pays for what they did," Davis replied coldly. Dr. Peterson sat in her laboratory aboard the Vengeance, preparing for first contact with an alien species. She had studied every piece of data they had about the Kaleri, but she knew that meeting them in person would be completely different. Her assistant, Dr. Kevin White, was setting up the medical equipment they would need to treat wounded Kaleri. "Doctor, do we even know if our medicine will work on them?" "We'll have to figure that out when we get there," Peterson replied. "But if they're asking for our help, they must believe we can provide it." The ship's intercom came to life. "All hands, this is Captain Brooks. We're approaching the Kaleri system. Battle stations, everyone." Peterson felt her stomach tighten. In a few minutes, they would know if their desperate mission had any chance of success on the bridge. Brooks watched as the fleet prepared to drop out of hyperspace. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of an entire species. 30 seconds to normal space," announced the navigator. "All weapons ready," reported the tactical officer. "Medical team standing by," added the ship's doctor. Brooks took a deep breath. "Drop us out of hyperspace." The stars reappeared outside the windows, and immediately the bridge erupted in activity. The Kaleri system was directly ahead, but it wasn't empty. Dozens of alien ships surrounded the planet, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. "Captain, I'm reading over 60 enemy vessels," reported the tactical officer. "They're arranged in a blockade formation around the planet?" "Any sign of the Kaleri?" Brooks asked. "Scanning now. I'm detecting life signs on the planet's surface, but they're scattered and weak. Most of the cities appear to be destroyed." Brooks felt a cold rage building in his chest. They were too late to prevent the invasion, but they might still be able to save some of the Kaleri people. "All ships, this is Fleet Command," he announced over the radio. "We have visual confirmation of the enemy. They have the planet surrounded and appear to be in the process of destroying the civilization. We're going in." Commander Sullivan looked at the tactical display. "Captain, we're outnumbered 5-1. Are you sure about this?" Brooks smiled grimly. "Kate, those aliens down there called for help. They specifically asked for humans because they heard we were tough. Let's show them what Earth is capable of." The fleet began to move toward the enemy blockade. The hegemony ships were massive, each one 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. But they were also slow and predictable, designed to overwhelm enemies through sheer size rather than skill. "Captain, the enemy has spotted us," reported the communications officer. "They're sending a transmission." "Put it through." The voice that came over the speakers was deep and mechanical, speaking in perfect galactic common. "Unknown vessels, you are entering hegemony territory. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Brooks picked up the microphone. "This is Captain Ryan Brooks of the Terran Defense Force. We're here to help the Kaleri people. Leave this system immediately." There was a pause, then the alien voice returned. "Terran, we have not heard of this species. You will surrender your ships and prepare to be boarded." "I don't think so," Brooks replied. "All ships prepare to engage. Let's show these bullies what happens when they pick on our friends." The human fleet accelerated toward the enemy blockade. The hegemony ships began to turn to face them, their massive weapons powering up. But the humans had something the aliens didn't expect: the desperate courage of a species that had learned to fight on the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The first shots were fired, and humanity's first interstellar war began. The first enemy shot missed the Vengeance by less than 50 meters. The plasma bolt lit up space with a brilliant blue flash before disappearing into the darkness. Captain Brooks felt the heat wash over his ship's hull as they dove toward the hegemony blockade. "Return fire!" Brooks shouted. "All weapons, target the lead ship." The Vengeance's guns opened up, sending streams of projectiles and energy beams toward the massive alien vessel. The human weapons were smaller than the hegemonies, but they were faster and more accurate. The enemy ship's shields flared as the shots connected. "Direct hit, Captain," called out the tactical officer. "But their shields are holding." Brooks watched the tactical display as the rest of the human fleet engaged the enemy. The Aurora launched her fighters, small craft that buzzed around the huge hegemony ships like angry wasps. The Relentless opened fire with her heavy guns, targeting the enemy flagship. "Captain, we're getting a communication from the planet," reported Lieutenant Chung. "It's the Kaleri. Put it through." The voice that came over the speakers was weak but filled with hope. "Human ships, this is Elder Neth of the Kaleri Resistance. We cannot believe you came. We thought we would die here. Alone. Elder Neth, this is Captain Brooks. We're here to help. Can you tell us about the enemy positions?" "The hegemony has troops in all our major cities. They have camps where they keep our people. Their main base is in our capital city, but be careful, human friend. They are very strong." Brooks smiled grimly. "Don't worry about us. We're used to fighting things that are stronger than us. Can you get your people to safety? We will try. Thank you for coming to help us." The communication ended, and Brooks turned his attention back to the battle. The hegemony ships were firing everything they had at the human fleet, but the smaller Earth vessels were proving difficult to hit. Captain Sullivan was weaving the escort ship Defiant between the enemy fire, her crew working frantically to keep the shields up. "All ships, this is Fleet Command," Brooks announced. "Execute attack pattern Alpha. We're going in close." The human fleet scattered into 3 groups, each one diving toward a different section of the blockade. The hegemony commanders had never seen tactics like this. Most space battles were fought at long range, with ships standing off and exchanging fire until one side was destroyed. But the humans were charging directly into the enemy formation. Commander Sullivan led her group of fighters in a desperate attack on the hegemony flagship. The massive alien ship was over a kilometer long, bristling with weapons and armor. It should have been impossible for small fighters to damage it. "All fighters, follow me in," Sullivan called over the radio. "We're going to hit them where it hurts." The human pilots dove toward the enemy ship, dodging plasma bolts and missile fire. 3 fighters were destroyed in the first pass, but the survivors pressed on. They had trained for this moment their entire careers, and they weren't going to let their friends down. Sullivan's fighter screamed toward the flagship's bridge, her weapons locked on target. At the last second, she pulled up, but not before launching every missile she had. The explosions lit up the enemy ship's hull, and for a moment, the massive vessel stopped firing. "Direct hit," shouted her wingman. "You got their command center." But the victory was short-lived. The hegemony ship began firing again, and this time they were targeting the human fighters specifically. Sullivan watched in horror as 2 more of her pilots were shot down. "All fighters, pull back," she ordered. "We've done what we came to do." On the planet's surface, Colonel Miller was preparing for the most dangerous mission of his career. The Aurora had dropped his Marines in the ruins of the Kaleri capital city, and now they were advancing toward the hegemony base, Alpha Squad. "Report," Miller said into his radio. "This is Sergeant Martinez. We've got visual on the enemy base. It's big, sir. Really big." Miller crawled up to the ridge where Martinez was hiding and looked through his binoculars. The hegemony had built their base in the center of the city, using Kaleri buildings as part of their fortifications. He could see alien soldiers patrolling the walls, their weapons ready. "How many?" Miller asked. "At least 500, sir." "Maybe more, and they're huge. Each one of them is twice our size." Miller studied the enemy soldiers through his binoculars. The hegemony troops were heavily armored, carrying energy weapons that could punch through concrete. But they moved slowly, and they seemed to rely more on their technology than their instincts. All squads, this is Colonel Miller. We're going in. Remember, these aliens have never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. Use that to your advantage. The Marines began their attack just as the sun was setting. They moved through the ruins of the city like ghosts, using the destroyed buildings for cover. The hegemony soldiers were watching the sky, expecting an attack from above. They weren't ready for enemies who could crawl through rubble and fight. In the dark, Sergeant Tony Garcia led Bravo's squad through the sewers beneath the city. The tunnels were narrow and filled with debris, but they provided a way to get close to the enemy base without being seen. "This is Bravo squad," Garcia whispered into his radio. "We're in position beneath the east wall." "Copy that, Bravo. Wait for my signal." Garcia and his men planted their explosives carefully. The charges were designed to collapse the tunnel system beneath the hegemony base, creating chaos and confusion. It was a risky plan, but it was the only way to even the odds. "All squads, this is Miller. Execute in 3, 2, 1, mark." The explosions lit up the night sky. The eastern wall of the hegemony base collapsed in a shower of concrete and metal. Alarms began blaring as the alien soldiers rushed to their positions, but the humans were already inside. Lieutenant Carl Johnson led Charlie's squad through the gap in the wall, his men firing at anything that moved. The hegemony soldiers were tough, but they were also confused. They had never faced an enemy that could move so fast and strike so hard. "Contact left?" Johnson shouted, diving for cover as plasma bolts flew over his head. "Garcia, can you flank them?" "Already on it, sir." Garcia and his men were moving through the base like they owned it. Using their knowledge of urban warfare to outmaneuver the larger aliens, the battle for the base lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the hegemony forces had been completely defeated, but the victory came at a cost. 12 Marines were dead, and twice that many were wounded. Miller stood in the ruins of the enemy command center, looking at the alien technology scattered around him. The hegemony had been using the base to coordinate their attacks on Kaleri civilians. Now it was just smoking wreckage. "Colonel, we've got Kaleri civilians approaching from the north," reported Martinez. "Looks like about 200 of them." Miller walked outside to see a group of cat-like aliens moving cautiously toward the base. They were smaller than humans, with large eyes and fur that ranged from brown to gray. Many of them were injured, and all of them looked terrified and elderly. Kaleri stepped forward, speaking in broken English. "You are the humans, the warriors from the Death World?" "That's right," Miller replied. "We're here to help." The Kaleri elder began to cry. "We thought we would all die. The hegemony was going to kill us tomorrow, but you came, you saved us." Miller felt a lump in his throat. "It's what we do. We don't leave friends behind." In space, the battle was still raging. The hegemony fleet was larger and better armed, but the human ships were faster and more maneuverable. Captain Brooks was pushing his crew to their limits, but they were holding their own. "Captain, we're getting reports from the surface," Lieutenant Shutt announced. "Colonel Miller's Marines have taken the enemy base. They're asking for medical support." "Tell them help is on the way," Brooks replied. "What about the space battle?" "We've destroyed 6 enemy ships, but we've lost the escort ship Phoenix. The Defiant is badly damaged, and the Aurora took a direct hit to her engines." Brooks studied at the tactical display. The human fleet was winning, but just barely. If the hegemony brought in reinforcements, they would be in serious trouble. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. We need to end this quickly. Target their command ships. If we can take out their leadership, the rest might surrender." The Relentless moved into position, her heavy guns tracking the hegemony flagship. "Captain." Davis had been waiting for this moment, and he wasn't going to waste it. "All weapons, full power." "Fire." The Relentless unleashed everything she had. The massive energy beams slammed into the enemy flagship, overloading its shields and punching through its armor. The huge ship began to list to one side, fires breaking out along its hull. "Direct hit," Davis shouted. "Their flagship is crippled. but the victory celebration was short-lived. The damaged hegemony ship began to glow with a strange light, and energy readings were going off the charts. "Captain, I think they're going to self-destruct," warned the tactical officer. "All ships get clear," Brooks ordered. "Emergency burn now." The human fleet scattered as the hegemony flagship exploded. In a ball of white fire, the blast wave hit the other alien ships, destroying 2 more and damaging several others. When the light faded, the surviving hegemony ships were retreating. The battle was over, and somehow, impossibly, the humans had won. Brooks slumped in his command chair, exhausted. Around him, his crew was cheering, but he could only think about the price they had paid. Too many good people. The news of the human victory spread through the hegemony fleet like wildfire. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they had been defeated by a smaller force. The surviving alien commanders gathered aboard their remaining flagship. Trying to understand what had gone wrong, Admiral Vex, the hegemony's senior commander, stood before a holographic display showing the battle results. His species, the Corvani, had been conquering worlds for over 3 centuries. They were twice the size of humans, with thick armor-like skin and muscles built for crushing their enemies. But the small creatures from Earth had outfought them. At every turn, how many ships did we lose? Vex asked his tactical officer. 12 destroyed, sir. 8 more are too damaged to fight. The humans destroyed our main base on the planet and freed most of the Kaleri prisoners. Vex slammed his massive fist on the table. How is this possible? They had only 12 ships against our 60. Sir, they fight differently than any species we've encountered. They don't follow standard battle tactics. They attacked us directly instead of maintaining safe distances. Their ground forces moved through areas we thought were impassable. Another officer spoke up. "Admiral, we've intercepted their communications. They call their world Earth, and they refer to it as a death world. The other species in this galaxy avoid them." "A death world," Vex repeated slowly. "That would explain their unusual abilities. Send a message to High Command. Tell them we need reinforcements and information about these humans." On the planet's surface, Dr. Amy Peterson was treating wounded Kaleri in a makeshift medical station. The cat-like aliens were smaller than she had expected, standing only about 4 feet tall. Their large eyes showed intelligence and curiosity, but also deep trauma from their ordeal. "Doctor, this one has been shot with a plasma weapon," said Corpsman Billy Adams, carrying a young Kaleri female. "The burn goes all the way through her shoulder." Peterson examined the wound carefully. Kaleri biology was different from human, but not so different that she couldn't help. "Get me the tissue regenerator. We can heal this, but she's going to need rest." The Kaleri female looked up at Peterson with wide golden eyes. "You are the human healer?" she asked in broken English. Double quotes. "Yes, I'm Dr. Peterson. What's your name?" "I am called Lyra. I study the stars like you study the healing. The hegemony burned my school. They said knowledge was dangerous." Peterson felt anger building in her chest. The hegemony hadn't just been conquering the Kaleri. They had been trying to destroy their entire culture. "Well, Lyra, we're going to make sure you can study the stars again." Nearby, Colonel Miller was meeting with Elder Keth and other Kaleri leaders. The aliens had gathered in what remained of their government building, trying to figure out how to rebuild their civilization. "Human Colonel, we do not understand how you defeated the hegemony," Elder Keth said. "They have conquered 47 worlds. Their warriors are giants compared to your people." Miller smiled. "Elder Keth, on our world, we learned that size isn't everything. We've been fighting bigger, stronger creatures our entire evolution. We learned to be smarter, faster, and more determined. Your world taught you to fight every day. Our planet has predators that hunt in packs, weather that can kill you in minutes, and diseases that can wipe out entire populations. We learned to survive by working together and never giving up." Elder Keth's ears flattened against his head. "Your world sounds terrible. How do you live there?" "It's not terrible to us. It's home, and it made us strong enough to help friends." Like you, a younger Kaleri stepped forward. Colonel, the hegemony will return. They always return with more ships. How can we defend ourselves? Miller thought for a moment. We'll teach you. Not how to be warriors like us, but how to be survivors. How to hide, how to move without being seen, how to strike back when they least expect it. In space, Captain Brooks was dealing with his own problems. The human fleet had won the battle, but they were far from home and badly damaged. The Aurora's engines were operating at 50% power. The Defiant had lost half her weapons. Several of the support ships had taken serious damage. Captain, we're receiving long-range communications from the Hegemony fleet, Lieutenant Chun reported. They're calling for reinforcements. How far out? Hard to tell, sir. But based on their transmission patterns, I'd guess at least a week. Brooks nodded. That gave them time, but not much. Get me Admiral Harper on Earth. We need to report our situation. The transmission to Earth took several minutes to reach home due to the vast distance. When Admiral Harper's response came back, her voice was filled with pride and concern. Captain Brooks, the entire planet is celebrating your victory, but we're worried about your position. Can you make it home? We can make it, Admiral, but not quickly. Our ships are damaged and we're carrying Kaleri refugees. We need time to make repairs. Understood. We're sending a support fleet, but it'll take them 2 weeks to reach you. Can you hold out that long? Brooks looked at his tactical display. The hegemony reinforcements would arrive before the Earth fleet. We'll figure something out, Admiral. The Kaleri need our help. Dr. Peterson had been working with Kaleri scientists to understand their technology. What she found amazed her. The aliens had developed incredible advances in medicine, energy production, and space travel. But they had never developed weapons of war. Dr. Peterson, this is fascinating, said Dr. Nira, a Kaleri physicist. Your people have created tools of destruction that we never imagined, but why? Because we had to, Peterson replied. Our world is dangerous. We developed weapons to hunt for food, to defend ourselves from predators, and eventually to fight each other. It's not something we're proud of, but it's part of who we are. The hegemony sees weakness in peaceful species like us. They think we cannot fight back. That's where they're wrong. You don't have to become warriors to defend yourselves. You just need to be smart about it. Peterson pulled up a holographic display showing Kaleri technology. Look at your energy systems. With a few modifications, those power cells could become incredibly powerful explosives. Your transportation network could be used to move resistance fighters quickly around the planet. Dr. Nira's eyes widened. You want us to turn our peaceful technology into weapons? I want you to turn your technology into tools of survival. There's a difference. Meanwhile, Major Scott Davis was leading a special team on a dangerous mission. Intelligence suggested that the hegemony had a secret facility on one of the system's outer moons. If the reports were correct, it was where they kept their most important prisoners. Alpha Team, this is Davis. We're approaching the target. Remember, this is a stealth mission. No shooting unless we have no choice. The team moved through the abandoned mining facility like shadows. The hegemony had converted the mine into a prison, using the deep tunnels to hold prisoners from multiple worlds. Davis could hear voices echoing from below, speaking in languages he didn't recognize. Major, I've got visual on the prison levels, whispered Sergeant Lisa Thompson. There are hundreds of aliens down there, not just Kaleri. Davis peered over the edge of the mining shaft. Below, he could see prisoners from at least 6 different species. The hegemony had been busy conquering other worlds while they were fighting on Kalara Prime. Change of plans, Davis said. We're not leaving anyone behind. Thompson, set charges on the main support pillars. We're bringing this whole place down on the guards. The rescue mission took 4 hours. When it was over, Davis and his team had freed over 300 prisoners from multiple worlds. But they had also learned something disturbing. The hegemony wasn't just an empire. It was a plague spreading across the galaxy and destroying every civilization it encountered. Major, some of these prisoners have been here for years, Thompson. reported, "The hegemony has been conquering worlds faster than anyone realized." Davis looked at the freed aliens. They were weak, frightened, and traumatized. But they were alive, and that was what mattered. "Get them to the ships," Dr. Peterson is going to have her hands full. Back on Kalara Prime, Elder Keth was meeting with his remaining government officials. The hegemony attack had killed most of their leaders, leaving the survivors to rebuild from almost nothing. "The humans say they will teach us to defend ourselves," one official said, "but at what cost? Do we want to become a warrior species like them?" "The humans are not just warriors," Elder Keth replied. "They are also healers, teachers, and protectors. They came across the galaxy to help strangers. That is not the action of a violent species. But they destroyed the hegemony fleet so easily. They killed without hesitation." Elder Keth was quiet for a moment. "My friend, sometimes killing is necessary to protect innocent life. The humans understand this. Perhaps it is time we learned it too." Captain Brooks was studying intelligence reports when Commander Sullivan approached him. The information they had gathered from the freed prisoners painted a disturbing picture of hegemony expansion. "Captain, based on what we've learned, the hegemony has conquered over 50 worlds in the past decade," Sullivan said. "They're not slowing down. If anything, they're accelerating. What about the other major powers in the galaxy? Aren't they doing anything to stop this?" "That's the problem, sir. There are no major powers. Most advanced species are peaceful, like the Kaleri." The hegemony reinforcements arrived exactly 1 week after the first battle. Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of his new flagship, watching as over 200 warships dropped out of hyperspace. This time there would be no mistakes. The humans would be crushed, and the galaxy would remember what happened to those who defied the hegemony. "Admiral, we're detecting the human fleet," reported his tactical officer. "They're in orbit around the third planet. Only 9 ships remaining, and several appear to be damaged." Vex smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Excellent. They stayed to protect their new friends. Their compassion will be their downfall. Begin the attack." On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Brooks watched the massive enemy fleet approach. The odds were worse than before, 20 to 1 against them. But they weren't the same humans who had arrived a week ago. They had learned from their first battle, and they had help. "Captain, the Kaleri defense network is online," reported Lieutenant Chun. "Their planetary shields are at full power, and they've converted their mining stations into weapon platforms." Brooks nodded. Dr. Peterson and the Kaleri scientists had worked around the clock to turn peaceful technology into tools of war. It wouldn't be enough to stop the hegemony fleet, but it would help even the odds. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the enemy," Chun continued. "Put it through." Admiral Vex's voice filled the bridge, cold and threatening. "Human captain, this is your final warning. Surrender your ships, and we will give you a quick death. Continue to resist, and we will make you watch as we destroy every Kaleri city." Brooks picked up the microphone. "Admiral Vex, this is Captain Brooks. I have a counteroffer. Leave the system immediately, and we won't have to embarrass you in front of your entire fleet again." There was a long pause. Then Vex began to laugh, a sound like grinding metal. "You have courage, human, but courage without wisdom is just stupidity. Attack!" The hegemony fleet opened fire with everything they had. Thousands of plasma bolts and missiles streaked toward the human ships and the planet below. But this time, the humans were ready. "All ships, execute Operation Thunder," Brooks commanded. The human fleet didn't try to meet the enemy head-on. Instead, they scattered in all directions, using the planet's gravity well and the debris from the first battle to hide their movements. The Kaleri defense platforms opened fire, targeting the largest enemy ships with converted mining lasers. "Commander." Sullivan led the Aurora and her remaining fighters in a desperate attack on the enemy's left flank. They had studied the hegemony ships during the past week, looking for weaknesses. What they found was that the aliens relied too heavily on their shields and armor. They never expected enemies to target their engines and weapons directly. "All fighters target their propulsion systems," Sullivan ordered. If we can't destroy them, we'll make sure they can't maneuver. The small human craft dove between the massive alien ships, firing at their engine pods and weapon mounts. It was incredibly dangerous, but it was working. Several hegemony vessels lost power and began drifting helplessly on the planet's surface. Colonel Miller was coordinating the defense of the major cities. The Kaleri had learned quickly, setting up hidden weapons caches and underground tunnels. When the hegemony landing ships arrived, they found a very different reception than they expected. Alpha Squad, they're coming down in Sector 7, Miller spoke into his radio. Beta Squad, move to intercept. Remember, hit them fast and disappear. Sergeant? Martinez led her team through the ruins of the capital city, moving toward the hegemony landing zone. The enemy troops were bigger and stronger than humans, but they were also predictable. They moved in formation, relied on their heavy weapons, and expected their enemies to fight them directly. There! Martinez whispered, pointing to a group of hegemony soldiers advancing down the main street. Lara, are your people ready? The young Kaleri scientist nodded nervously. She and her fellow survivors had volunteered to help fight the invaders. They weren't warriors, but they knew every tunnel, every hidden passage, every secret route through their city. We are ready, Sergeant Martinez. The explosive charges are in place. Martinez smiled. The Kaleri had been fast learners. Then let's give them a warm welcome. The explosion brought down an entire building on top of the advancing hegemony troops. Before the survivors could react, Martinez and her team were firing from the rubble, then disappearing back into the tunnels. It was guerrilla warfare at its finest, something the hegemony had never encountered. In space, Captain Brooks was fighting the battle of his life. The Vengeance was surrounded by enemy ships, her shields failing under constant bombardment. But the other human vessels were still fighting, still causing damage far beyond what their size suggested. Captain, the Relentless reports she's lost main power, Lieutenant Chen called out. The Defiant is down to emergency life support. Brooks watched as another hegemony ship exploded, its hull torn apart by human weapons. They were winning individual battles, but they couldn't win the war. There were just too many enemies. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from long range. Chun said, excitement in her voice. It's Admiral Harper. Put her through. Admiral Harper's voice crackled over the speakers. Captain Brooks, this is the cavalry. We're dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds. The stars behind the hegemony fleet suddenly lit up as dozens of new ships appeared. Earth had sent everything they could spare, warships, converted civilian vessels, and even experimental craft that had never left the solar system before. This is Admiral Harper to all hegemony vessels. You are surrounded. Surrender immediately, or we will destroy you. Admiral Vex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had somehow managed to bring an entire fleet across interstellar space without being detected. His forces were now caught between two human groups, with the Kaleri defenses still firing from the planet. Sir, what are your orders? His tactical officer asked. Vex was silent for a long moment. The hegemony had never retreated from a battle. It would be seen as a sign of weakness by the other species they had conquered. But staying would mean the destruction of his entire fleet. Signal the retreat, he said finally. All ships withdraw to hyperspace. The surviving hegemony vessels began to pull back, but the humans weren't finished with them. Admiral Harper's fresh fleet pursued them to the edge of the system, making sure they knew they weren't welcome to return. On the planet, the celebrations began immediately. Kaleri civilians emerged from their hiding places, cheering and crying. With joy, the nightmare was over. The hegemony had been defeated not once, but twice. Colonel Miller stood in the central square of the capital city, watching as humans and Kaleri worked together to clear the rubble and tend to the wounded. Dr. Peterson was treating injured civilians of both species, her medical team working alongside Kaleri healers. Colonel Miller, Elder Keth approached, his golden eyes bright with gratitude. How can we ever repay you for what you have done? Miller shook his head. Elder Keth, you don't owe us anything. We did what anyone should do when they see people in trouble. But that is not true, the Kaleri leader replied. In all our years of space travel, we have met many species. Most ignore the suffering of others. Some even join the oppressors for profit. Only humans came to help strangers. A young Kaleri approached them, carrying a small device. It was Lyra, the scientist, who had helped in the fighting. "Colonel Miller, we have made something for you." A gift. She handed him a crystal pendant that glowed with soft light. "This is made from the minerals of our world. As long as you carry it, you will have a friend among the Kaleri people." Miller accepted the gift, feeling its warmth in his hands. "Thank you, Lyra, but you know this isn't over, right? The hegemony will try again, maybe not here, but somewhere else." "Yes," Elder Keth said solemnly, "but now they know they face humans. Word will spread. Other oppressed peoples will call for help, and the hegemony will think twice before attacking peaceful worlds." Captain Brooks stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching as the combined human fleet prepared for the journey home. They had rescued hundreds of aliens from multiple worlds, each with stories of hegemony brutality. The war was far from over. "Captain, we're receiving requests for help from 12 different star systems," Lieutenant Chun reported. "They all heard about what we did here," Brooks sighed. He had known this would happen. By helping the Kaleri, humanity had painted a target on their back. But they had also announced to the galaxy that there was someone willing to fight. For those who couldn't fight for themselves, send the request to Admiral Harper, Brooks decided. Earth Command will have to decide what we do next. Dr. Peterson joined him on the bridge, carrying her final report. "Captain, I've finished studying the freed prisoners. The hegemony isn't just conquering worlds. They're systematically destroying cultures, enslaving populations, and wiping out entire species. How many worlds have they taken? At least 67 that we know of. And they're expanding faster every year." Brooks looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, innocent people were suffering under hegemony rule, hoping that someone would come to help them. Earth was just one world with a small fleet, but they had something the galaxy had forgotten: the will to fight for others. "Doctor, do you think we can really make a difference?"